I've got two pieces that are going into the collective show. Both are seasonal in nature. All of my work is based on outdoor experience, time in the woods, walking, canoeing or kayaking, things like that. But one that'll be in the show is titled Beltane, and I captured it early in May. I started out as a plein air painter, but I've now shifted to just spending time outside and documenting it photographically and then responding in the studio. And so that's what you'll see in that one. And the other one has a title that's yet to be determined, but it's more like a midsummer scene with mullein plants taking over. But everything's mostly outdoors. Lately, all the work has been coming from the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, so I spent a lot of time up there hiking and walking in the woods, so that's where it's all coming from. I find myself, when I have any extra time, I come back to the studio. It helps keep me more regimented. I'm here at specific times, specific days, and it's also being surrounded with artists. I can take a walk down the hall in any direction and talk to someone, which oftentimes earlier in my art career I was pretty isolated. So that's probably the biggest thing that works for me, and just to have the support of the gallery and studios works very well for me.
So right now I'm working on a print series, 5 screen prints that are 4 colors each, and I was interested in just moving back into print media to do something different, really. I feel sometimes that I get bogged down when I'm doing only one thing, when I'm only painting, and then I wanted to try it. I wanted to get back into the print lab. My work kind of sits between fine art and illustration, which takes a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's painting, sometimes printmaking, sometimes drawing. I started working with VAR back in 2021, right after I graduated. I was in the Plum Blossom Initiative residency bridge work. So my first studio was over at 5th Street, and I loved it there, and I moved out this past June, and then I went about a month without a studio, and then I moved into this space, and I love it. It's been really important for me too with getting a full-time job, being back in the studio and having just a healthy relationship with that while I'm also doing all sorts of other stuff, and kind of forcing myself into like accountability for working all the time. One of the best parts of being involved with VAR over the past, I guess, year and a half or so is how many friends I've made and how supportive everyone is, especially to, younger emerging artists, where in some like art scenes in different cities, they just kind of blow you off because you're young. But I feel really appreciated here, and I love that. And I admire my peers so much, and I'm just always happy to show with them, so.
Simultaneously, I have a solo opening at BTG opening. So that is all about a relationship to myself. It's about a relationship to the community I gained while working at VAR, and then the relationship to the building I lived in for 2 years. That's across the what used to be on 5th and Bruce. So there's been a lot of mini-series that has come out of the work. So for the collective show I've chosen to do, it's going to be a video diptych, but essentially it's a slideshow of postcards I made. It was a collaborative photo project from a party I threw the last week that I lived in the apartment. So I took Polaroid portraits of my friends that came because I knew the landscape was about to change. So I wanted everyone to have their own autonomy over choosing what parts of the landscape they were going to remember. But the trade-off was they needed to take a picture of that Polaroid somewhere in the apartment. And that way too is just like one more layer of memory, but with the help of my friends. So the postcards, they have the picture on the front, and on the back I wrote a haiku about our friendship. It was kind of like a promise to the future of like, I'm leaving here, but the friendship will carry on. So what I've done is I've scanned both sides, and then I've just, in Photoshop I've layered them, because if you physically hold the postcard, and if you hold it up to the sun, then it becomes a little bit, you can see the writtenness. So I really like that you can see my handwriting over their image. So the two videos, it will essentially be the same one, but it's a little bit then more of like a living piece, because it will never be like the same sequence next to each other again. But you'll just see all my friends like fading in and out on 2 TV screens, and that's the piece that will be in the collective show. I interned here starting in 2015, and then I transitioned into working here for 5 years. So through that I had a studio. So that first chunk, the community has been a source of education and a source of great support. A lot of the people I surround myself with now, like on the weekends, are people I met at VAR. And what I mean with that support, like support in motivation, accountability, and self-esteem, through just conversation, through acts of listening, and the accountability of seeing other people make and be like, I want to make too. It's been a source of fun. Like, I love the conversation here. It's just been a source of like lightness, of like other ways I can make. But yeah, the community has been, I guess if I could summarize it, like what it was then and what it was now, what's been continuous of like the family that I've always wanted, of shared interest, of challenging and just like opening up what is possible in the world, especially centered in an artistic practice, because I just did not, I didn't grow up with necessarily being surrounded by people that's their career. Like, I definitely grew up with support for creativity, but this is just like a whole nother extension and experience that I would argue is probably like unique, like nationwide. And I think it's like a mini reunion, you know, even though we're all in the same building and our studios are in proximity to each other, everyone is so dedicated to their work. It's a reason, and again, that accountability to give fun to all of us, to hang out. It's also a source of pride. You know, we are one pocket of Milwaukee, but it's really hard to organize people. So I take a lot of pride in that. You know, 20-some people decided they're going to take the time to install the works in one space together. And then usually what happens is it's such an eclectic variety of works. So it's also, I think, a nice representation of like what's possible, and what is happening. And then it's also, I think it's like a nice access point either to people like the general public or other artists, because chances are there's going to be something for everyone. And so it's a really nice conversation point to welcome people into something. Like, solo shows are great because it's a whole idea spread into one space. But this one, maybe if that one idea doesn't resonate with you, like the odds of feeling or relating to something for the collective show. So for a strategic way, like, I think it's good. It's really good marketing representation of like of the space. So it's a chance to be like, hey, this is what I've been up to in Milwaukee. Yeah, so it's those things.
So the work that I'm putting in the show, in this exhibition, is some samples of a body of work I've been working on. They started as 2 separate projects, and they're sort of merging. One of the directions that I came from was body horror via still lives, cans, marketing. Wherever I go, I try and go into local places and take cans and find labels that I've never seen before and do still lives of them. It came sort of out of necessity, sort of not being able to have the space or studio space or space in my home to do bigger works. And so it was just a way for me to explore color and light and objects, and that really quickly morphed into bringing the influence that I have of transness, queerness, and horror films that I love. I love Cronenberg. I love a lot of special effects, and sort of trying to explore how you can take something that seems really streamlined and pervert it with distortion, colors, and so I love playing with that. The other work that I'm putting in here is based in pornography. I'll take stills from queer porn vintage, from sort of the golden age, like the 70s through the 80s, and I use that as a backdrop for me to explore sort of the lack of trans representation in the queer community historically. And through that, I also use a very loose hand. I use a lot of distorted imagery, and so it's sort of drawing your eye to not the image you're looking at yourself. It's looking at it's drawing you into thinking what the observer is thinking. And so I've sort of merged those two, having objects and having bodies sort of come together in this, bodies as objects, objects as humanity, having distortion as sort of a love language to queerness and transness, and finding yourself through sort of tokens and iconography in your day-to-day life. And so those are the pieces I'm putting in. I'm doing acrylic painting and then also colored pencils, and I like kind of playing with simplifying down forms through those mediums. So I'm new to VAR, and I'm excited to be here as someone who's practiced both through my own home studios, not practicing at all, and being a part of other gallery and studio communities, like back in Oakland when I lived in California. I'm excited to be a part of VAR because I don't think that art is made in isolation. Even if you're in your own studio like mine, I'm still around artists. I'm still influenced by the gallery shows and the musicians and the artists that I run into, even if it's moment by moment, and being able to walk through people's other galleries on my way to, and other studios on my way to my own space. I see art as being a constant collaboration, and I love the influence. I think day-to-day normalcy is really important in my practice. I think it's going to keep growing my practice. I think that being around other artists and being at VAR is going to keep growing my practice, expanding my ideas that I can bring into my work. And I've already seen how generous and how inclusive this space is. I'm seeing how many opportunities VAR is bringing me, not only socially, but as an artist, getting to see how I can interact with Milwaukee, with Wisconsin, with my peers and people to potentially collaborate with. I'm really excited to see how that goes, and I'm already seeing it benefiting my work in the short time that I've been here.
The work that's going into the collective show is based on a couple of ideas that I've had, one of them being Black Pearl and the other one Black Box. So for both of them I use encaustic medium, which is just beeswax mixed with resin as the base layer on wood panels, and then also mixing beeswax with oil paint just for the color. I love working with encaustic because I love the texture that I can get with encaustic. Really important to that type of work that I do. But for both of them, then I have this underlayer of texture and of color, but I use an overlayer of darkness that I get with graphite and charcoal just rubbed on top of the color. So then I'm using darkness to kind of highlight the color and the texture underneath, or to enhance it. And for Black Pearl, that's probably more like just the lustrousness in the hidden treasure inside of a pearl. That's being concealed and revealed by the darkness. And then for Black Box, it's more a black box. I mean, we all want to know what's inside of a black box. Could be good, could be bad, could be neutral, but you kind of wonder what's in there. So Black Box is just showing little pieces, hints of what might be under there. And that's the work that will be in the collective show. And in fact, using darkness to highlight, or to give maybe volume and mass and definition to light, is something that has something that I've used throughout my career, also in photography, which I've done a lot of. So VAR Studios has been just a great part of my life. I just retired recently, so now I'm here more full-time than I was a few years back. I've probably been with VAR for, I would say, at least 5 years now, so a good chunk of time. And I love it. I love having a studio space. I love old industrial buildings, so I've got the two things going for me over at VAR on Fifth. And it's nice. It is a nice community because there's always a lot going on Fifth Street. We have like 4 galleries over there, so that's nice too. And on Fifth Street, I work there on Thursday and Friday, so now I get to meet people that are putting their shows up and get to meet artists that I don't know and become familiar with their work, so I can talk about it to other people that are coming to see the shows. So that's nice. And then it's a great opportunity for me to show my work once or twice a year in the collective exhibits for sure. So, and just having other people around me, kind of feeling their energy, even if I don't see them necessarily in the hallways or walking around. Some people I have my own studio that's not kind of the pod type studio space that other people work in. So I don't always see other people, but sometimes I just feel what's happening next door or hear what's happening next door, and it's great. I love being a part of VAR and feel like it's nice. It's nice that it's not just studio space, which is great. I'll take it even if it was just studio space, but that there's also all this other stuff going on all the time. Yeah, a great opportunity.
The work that I'm putting in the collective show at VAR is like this piece. It doesn't have a title yet. I had this pink foam and drywall, so it's a drywall person. It's like that's the materials it's made out of, but also it's like planed off at the top end because my grandma, she does this thing where she takes, she makes these things for headstones of all her friends and all the people she lost, and replaces them when they get faded, and it's like this green foam. She sticks these silk flowers into it, and it looked like those blocks of foam to me, so I just stabbed a bunch of flowers in the top, I guess. It was kind of a violent process. I put it on its side when I was sculpting it, and it sort of rocked back and forth. And I don't know, it's more of an intuitive process than I'm used to doing. I just wanted to work really large, and they were free materials, and I could get really messy with the process because I had this sort of raw space to work in. I use my art to give memories and emotions a visual language, or to try to articulate it outside of my body and outside of my head. So I think that it's good to share it with other people, because sometimes I think that that's an easy language to speak. It's kind of universal. You can see it and not necessarily have to put it into words. Or it doesn't really matter how educated you are, and people can feel it. Or sometimes if you have experienced a particular thing, it will resonate, and it can, you can put your things in that box too. And it can kind of move it outside of you, so that it doesn't stay, you don't carry it. And it helps. Sometimes people respond strongly or emotionally, and I feel like that's a good thing. That helps people. At VAR, well, I just recently moved back into a space here. It's not just professionally a resource, but it's also like socially and emotionally, and I think all the things that I need to do for myself but like wouldn't do enough, it makes me balance out all the things like I wouldn't otherwise socialize enough or seek advice, and it gives me all those things. I go to a lot of more gallery shows than I would otherwise, and there's a lot of resources that I wouldn't have access to, and I think I keep in touch with mentors and friends and people that I think, having not been here for a short period of time, it was like 2 years, but it makes me grateful for it even more. So
the work I'm putting into the collective exhibition is a triptych that I made in I think 2018. It is some work that I created out of a lot of different textiles, found papers, found things, just like paper, textile, old artwork of mine from mostly college, and it's more kind of a collage and quilt patchwork of these different pieces put together that creates its own kind of like a quilt top. Then I put onto board and framed, but it's this really faceted plane of different textiles, textures that are sewn together, and kind of creates these little windows into different spaces that you can, get really close to, see really textured detail, get far away from it, and kind of changes your perspective based on where you're standing. I was at VAR. I had a studio at VAR at the end of 2014, so right after graduating college. I had a studio here for a few months. It was a really interesting time for me, kind of feeling pretty lost after school, not really having structure, not really knowing what I was going to do now with my art career or my life. So having a studio here at that time, it's interesting being back, because I've been back for a few months now. And this is 8 years later. And so having a studio here again, and having spent all that time, I moved away from Milwaukee, lived in some different places. It's really allowed me to see how I've grown in these last 8 years, how my professional career has changed and pivoted a little bit away from art, but how that's always been the thing I keep going back to, and kind of the thing I keep pulling from my experience in the art world in school, to then launch my career into selling vintage and working on restructuring old clothing into new pieces, and that creativity has always been consistent, and I'm looking forward to making more art, and like the piece I have in the show is definitely kind of a through line from work I was creating at the time I first was at VAR, and where when I do work on art, it's a continuation from that same work, that same thread, and literally like I'm using lots of thread and textiles, and so it's like and it's a lot about like memory, collective memory, personal memory, so it's just interesting to see, to be in a space that has daily and physical reminders of those memories. Yeah.